My name is Wendell Griffen. I'm a pastor of New Millennium Church in Little Rock, Arkansas. I've been a lawyer since 1979. I've served as an appeal court judge for the Arkansas Court of Appeals. I've taught law school to include the courses of constitutional law, criminal procedure, and a seminar on law and public law and cultural competence. I'm currently a trial judge in Arkansas, and I am a consultant in cultural competency and inclusion. From 1974 to 1976, I also was a race relations equal opportunity officer in the United States Army. And in that role, I worked with more than 4,000 men and women to help them understand how to deal with cultural, racial differences and the issues of inclusion. All of us have been watching with great concern the horrifying videos surrounding the killing of George Floyd on May 25th in Minneapolis. We've watched other visual images of abusive and homicidal police conduct. We've watched video of the killing of Walter Scott. We've watched video of the killing of Philando Castile. We've watched video of the killing of Alton Sterling. We've watched video of Tamir Rice. We've watched video after video of those horrifying and, let's be honest, unjust actions by people who are or were sworn not only to protect and to serve, but sworn first of all to uphold the Constitution of the United States, which guarantees the right of all persons to express their personal views freely, without intimidation, without oppression, without mistreatment from the government or the government's agencies. And so we have been alarmed. All of us who love freedom and justice have been alarmed at what we've seen. But we've not been alarmed just in the recent past. We've been alarmed for years. So it has been very interesting to see the response of law enforcement agencies, the response of governmental leaders to what has occurred since George Floyd was killed by 4 police officers on May 25. It's been interesting to watch how the Minneapolis Police Department responded to George Floyd's murder. Let's call it what it was, murder, on May 25. First of all, when the murder happened and the video went public of the murder, the police officers were fired but were not arrested. And when the public reasonably responded with alarm that 4 killers known to the Minneapolis Police Department were not arrested, the response of the Minneapolis Police Department was not to arrest the killers, but to assign protection for the killers. And then the response of the mayor of Minneapolis was to call the governor of Minnesota, to send the National Guard to Minneapolis. 500 National Guard persons, not to help arrest the killers and bring them into custody, but to confront and control and patrol people who were protesting the murder and the refusal to arrest the killers. People who peacefully protested killers and peacefully protested the refusal to arrest killers, to apprehend them and to bring them into custody, to protect the rest of society from killers known by the police, were met by forceful and violent measures. Much has been said about looting. Very little has been proven, however, that any of the peaceful protesters were responsible or have been responsible for the looting. And so it is interesting to note that the response of law enforcement and governors and mayors to peaceful protests is to lump peaceful protesters alongside people who are engaging in violent misbehavior on the one hand, while protecting violent behavior by law enforcement officers on the other hand, namely protecting officers who engage in abusive and homicidal police conduct. On June the 1st, peaceful protesters gathered in Lafayette Park across from the White House were violently forced from their place by uniformed government agents. Within minutes after President Donald Trump had made a Rose Garden speech calling himself your law and order president, and within hours after President Trump had demanded that the mayors and governors of the United States use the National Guard and their law enforcement agencies to dominate peaceful protesters. Curfews have been imposed, whereby peaceful protesters have been ordered to leave the streets. Not because the peaceful protesters were doing something violent in the streets, but because people who have not been identified as being part of the peaceful protest were taking advantage of the peaceful protest and under cover of the protest engaging in unlawful action. Just yesterday, June 4th, a 75-year-old man in Buffalo, New York, was pushed, shoved, fell after being pushed and shoved, struck his head on a hard surface, on a concrete surface, and began to bleed from his head and ears. And the pusher and the shover were law enforcement agencies, uniformed law enforcement agencies, who did not go to his aid. Their colleagues, rank by rank, walked past him and did not go to his aid. And as was the case with George Floyd, and as has been the case with the violent use of force against peaceful protesters in Lafayette Park, the narrative about what happened to that 75-year-old man has been misconstrued by the law enforcement agencies and by those who speak for law enforcement agencies. The first narrative was he slipped and fell. No, he was shoved. He was shoved backward. After being shoved backward, he fell. We saw it on the video. He struck his head. He began to bleed from his head. He did not move after he struck his head. And the video shows that law enforcement officers who have received first aid training walked past that man and rendered no aid, just in the same way that 3 law enforcement officers watched as a 4th one in Minneapolis, Minnesota, snuffed the life out of George Floyd, and hearing him say, "I can't breathe," did nothing to aid him. And so I think we have to ask ourselves some hard questions. Who is turning the law enforcement agencies of this nation into the Ku Klux Klan? Who is turning them into a form of Gestapo? Or are they behaving as they have been conditioned and trained? Have they been recruited? Have they been hired? Have they been trained? Have they been promoted? And are they being retained for the purpose of intimidating, oppressing, dominating, and domesticating the civilian population of the United States? These are not comfortable questions to ask, but they are necessary that we ask them. It is necessary that we admit what we are seeing. We are seeing tyranny at work. We are seeing fascism at work. We are seeing instance by instance, location by location, police agency by police agency, account by account, abusive and homicidal conduct by people in law enforcement, and we are seeing it happen with impunity. We're seeing it happen, and we're told that we must tolerate it. I say we must not. I say we should not. I say that because, number one, for us to accept the idea that vicious and violent law enforcement is justified because law enforcement agencies are uncomfortable with peaceful protest against vicious and abusive and homicidal law enforcement means that we are no longer free people, no longer just society. We are a police state. And I, for one, believe that we should reject the idea that the United States of America is or should become a police state. The police do not rule. We are a free society. But as Sly Stone said in that wonderful song he wrote in 1969, "Stand, don't you know that you are free? Well, at least in your mind, if you want to be." Sisters and brothers, we are free. We are free people. We do not need a curfew to tell us when to be free. We are free all the time. We are not free because mayors and governors and presidents tell us we are free. We are free people. We are free people because we are created free. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all persons are created equal, and that they are endowed by their creator, not by some government, not by some municipality, by some mayor, not by some president, not by some cop, not by some police force, not by some governor, not by the Attorney General of the United States, not by anybody else, but by the creator. They are endowed by their creator with inalienable rights. And among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We don't have the right to be free on curfew. We have the right to be free from birth. We don't have the right to be free because the president says so. We have the right to be free because our creator has given us that right. We don't have the right to be free because the media watches. We have the right to be free because we are human and we live in a free society. And it is up to us and us alone to decide whether we will surrender that right to those who insist on our subservience to their officious behavior. Because that's what it is. We're being told to accept authoritarianism as the price for freedom. We are told to accept strong arm, jackboot, Gestapo tactics from people we pay as taxpayers to protect and serve us as the price of freedom. No. The police work for us to guarantee and safeguard our rights to protest peacefully, and to safeguard our rights to protest peacefully at dark time and in daytime, and to safeguard our right to protest peacefully, whether they agree with why we're protesting or not, and to safeguard our right to protest peacefully, whether we are cursing them or praising them, and to safeguard our right to protest peacefully, regardless of where we find ourselves. We have the right to be and act like we're free. And so I am making this video to encourage us to remember our freedom. I want to send a shout out to the people the retired generals and admirals who have challenged Defense Secretary Esper and Joint Chiefs of Staff General Milley and President Trump about the use of the military. The use of the military to include National Guard and active duty military forces to intimidate, and dominate. No, that is wrong. I am an honorably discharged U.S. Army veteran, and it is wrong to use the military against the people of this nation. It is wrong for us to use the police forces against the people of this nation. It is wrong for the Attorney General of the United States to use federal agents in the Justice Department against the people of this nation. And it is wrong for the people of those agencies who have sworn an oath to protect and uphold the Constitution of the United States to believe that they are fulfilling their oath by following the orders to abuse and to violate the rights of people who are engaged in peaceful protest. And so I'm calling on those people who are in uniform, work for the government. Remember your oath. Remember your oath. You swore an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States. You swore an oath to stand up for freedom. You swore an oath. Remember your oath. And when somebody calls on you to disregard your oath and violate it against the people of this country, Remember, you have been given an unlawful order. Disobey it. Join the protest. Don't join the oppressors. My name is Wendell Griffen. I hope you will remember. You are free. You are free. You are free. Live out your freedom boldly, peacefully, fiercely, without fear. Do not allow the Gestapo to oppress you. And for a final word, let me say something to President Trump. President Trump, the people of the United States will not allow you to turn this nation into a 21st century version of Germany under Hitler or the Confederate States of America under Jefferson Davis. We will not go into your dark night. You, sir, have picked the wrong fight against the wrong people. You will lose because we